days, built on sweat and pain. Marines and cyclists breaking the chains. No fuel needed, just power and drive. Ride with me, let's come alive.
Hello and welcome. Wanted to welcome you to my channel. For those new to my channel, welcome. For those returning back, welcome. Appreciate your viewership. And so I'm going to be going through the Community Racing Festival Turf and Surf, or Surf and Turf. I like Surf and Turf. Huge fan of Surf and Turf. And so this course, the Turf and Surf, I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like I've ridden this course dozens of times over the last 30 days or so, between the Pinarello powered and now the Community Racing Festival, as well as a course I did not too long ago. I think last week I did it as well. And so you can see my little thumbnail adding some water to my bar tape. Got the Glacier bar tape, testing that out. I feel like it does help, especially indoors, where it's still warm in my garage. It's about 70, it was about 79 or so degrees towards the afternoon. And you know, adding some water to the bar tape, the one thing I can say about that bar tape that for me feels weird is the fact that it is it feels like a wet towel, like a saturated towel. So when you load it up with water, it starts to cool down, and it'll drop a good 5-6 degrees in terms of ambient temperature, and 5-6 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know about Celsius. So it'll drop a good, a couple degrees temperature and feel good, but when you grab onto the bar tape, or you grab onto your bar, it's saturated, like it's soaked, like you can squeeze the water out of it. And so that is, for me, that's a little weird, little getting used to, but like I said, it does help. So when it comes to this race, just gonna forward to the beginning here. So as we're getting ready to head off, about 40 something seconds left. I gotta say, this is my 4th race with my current nutrition and pre hydration, energy plan, or fueling plan. And I gotta say, it's been doing great for me. Hydrating. I've spent basically the first 2 hours before the race hydrating and working on making sure that, I'm cooling my body down. As I've talked about in the past, drinking electrolytes, a couple different electrolytes prior to, and then, I get about, essentially about 24, 48-ish ounces of water and electrolytes in me ahead of time. And then from there, I have my mixture of my amino acid supplements mixed in with MCT oil about an hour before the race. And from there on out, it's just kind of prepping, making sure I finish my hydration before the race. And once we get started, or as I'm warming up for the race, I will start to drink my energy drink, which is caffeinated, has a lot of B12 in it, so nothing crazy, no, I'm not, doing this on any sugar. And so, and I always like to point that out, because a big focus, especially, as of, the last couple of years, big focus is, you got to have 90 grams of carbs an hour in order to race. And yeah, I'm not doing a Tour de France level race, so that, that level of effort is very different than what I'm doing. But for what I'm doing is working, and that's the key, I think, in terms of racing at this level is, if what you're doing is working, then keep doing it, and really refine, maybe tweak when you start your routine, when you finish your routine, when you add or take away certain things in your routine. And so as we set off here into McCurry, I am, like I said before, I'm not a huge fan of this world. I feel like graphically it is amazing, it offers a lot, but also at the same time there's so much going on. I feel like it ends up overwhelming. Even my newer laptop, I feel like it ends up overwhelming it. And so as we're, starting to get through this alley, so obviously JD, I always ride on Mondays with him, and anyone else that joins into that group. I didn't know this at the time, and I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for it in the rider column. But Darren also joined the race and snuck in there somehow. I ended up finding out at the very end that he was in there, and so, which is always a pleasure to have, because he's such a great rider. And if you haven't come across his content, I'll be sure to add him to the description, tag him in the video, so that way you can jump onto his channel as well. And so, we're just riding along here at relatively normal pace. We were talking on JD's channel before we started that that was the idea, was hoping that we can kind of go out easy. A lot of these races, especially in the former C category, so right now the 350 to 420 group that I'm in, or no, not 350, 350 to 520 group that I'm in, there's a lot of B's, a lot of C's, so there's a tendency to go out pretty hard. Thankfully this time, I had to surge a little bit as I left the pen, but it calmed down very quickly. And so we're just kind of cruising right now through the city, and there's no one really trying to cause any trouble, trying to make anything happen. And so for me, I'm just looking at sitting in as best I can. I'm on the Pinarello with the Pinarello powered paint job and the DT Swiss disc wheels, because I feel like, as much as I used to joke about people who use the DT Swiss disc wheels for racing in certain scenarios, especially where there's decent climbs, I feel like at my current body weight, which is 86 kilograms, I'm bouncing between 86 and 87 kilograms, but still in the 86 range. So at my weight, at my power level, I feel like this combination works perfect. It's it's fast enough on the flats to help me stay with the group, but it's also light enough on the climbs. So yeah, I struggle a little bit, but I guess because it carries enough momentum through the flat spots, it helps me get to the next part of the climb with more efficiency, so I can get a little bit more rest. And so as we start going through this first initial climb, you see the group starts to split up a little bit, which I feel like, we saw that happen, and this was probably one of the first times where mentally I was like, you know what, it's starting to split up, no big deal. We got a lot of climbing left, we got a lot of racing left. And then as I saw the rest of the group start to come around me, I was like, perfect. We don't have to worry about, trying to take back anyone or make anything happen. So I'm gonna fast forward here because it is a lot of the same, just kind of staying in the group, staying in the draft as best as possible, keeping an eye on my draft gauge to make sure that I'm not doing too much work off the front. I do end up staying off the front a little bit because I feel like if I stay in the middle, I feel like I end up falling off the back. And so as we get out of the city here and into the jungle, you'll see that we got this one guy going off the front, and they're pushing pretty hard. As a group, we're kind of holding in the mid 200s right now in terms of wattage. But this person that goes off the front is probably hitting, I know as Zwift Sauce will show his separation. So right now he's hovering in the 300s, 350, 340. That's a good pace. He's got 3 seconds on us already. This part here, usually for this stage, is where people start to separate, because as you hit the gravel, the rolling resistance starts to change, and for people who aren't able to hold that extra wattage, because you see our average, my average wattage went up, probably 30, 40, watts, and so if you're not able to hold that extra wattage, even for just this little bit, as we're starting to go through these bridges, you're going to fall behind. And that's happened to me many times. So I'm always, every time I get to this point, I'm always, focused on like, all right, stay with the group. Gotta make sure I work to, to keep on with that draft. We don't have a lot of racers in this race. The little chart there showing about 31 riders, and that's for a Monday, that's kind of low. And I feel like maybe it's because other people are focused on the Tour de Zwift, and so this group was mainly I have to check Zwift Power, but I feel like this group was mainly some of the original C category guys. So maybe Zwift racing score probably no more than 450, somewhere around there. I'm at 420 now after the tiny races from this weekend. And so you see that guy is still off the front, holding mid to low 200s. Still got a few seconds on us. And again, this is a part where if you have the power to separate yourself, that's where I've seen a lot of launches happen. Especially some of the stronger upper Zwift racing score guys, 500s, 510s, even into the 520s if they're still in this category. That's usually where they start to separate here, because not only do you have the rolling resistance from the gravel, but you also have this little climb that's just long and draggy enough that if you're already hurting from the extra rolling resistance, then you're just going to fall off here. And so luckily I stay on, and that's kind of my focus from here on out, is just keeping with the group and staying on as best as possible. So as we get into this bridge, my focus again is staying on, staying with the group. This 3-4% climb is, it's just tough enough to where it offers a good opportunity to split up the group again. And if you're not pushing hard on this bridge, then you're likely going to fall off the back. And so that's kind of what I did. I pushed, into the 400s, but as I came up over the crest, I made the same mistake I always make, which is I started backing off a little bit too early. And what ends up happening is the people that carried their momentum through the top of that end up passing me and almost, completely dropping me off the back. And so as I'm seeing that happen, I'm pushing up the watts into the low, upper 290s, low 300s, so I can stay on with this group and basically have to do my own, individual time trial for maybe about a minute or so, just to kind of hold onto this group. My focus was, I saw the split happening, a few riders ahead, and I did not want to end up behind that split. So I figure if I can push and get up towards the front of this group where the bigger bunch was at, then at least I won't fall too far behind. Because again, there's this little drag upward that again can split the group if you're not bunched together. And so that was my focus, to carry my momentum over the top of this. Even though there's a couple guys off the front, I wasn't too worried about that, because we do have the climb coming up, and that's usually where the group is gonna truly split apart if it's gonna happen. So just as we get into the base of this climb, you can see I'm a little bit off the back, but I wasn't too worried about that. I was focused on putting a little bit of power down. I knew, so while I do like climbs like this where it's intense power for a few seconds or half a minute, and then it eases off, it gives me a little bit of time to recover. When they get as long as this climb does, it becomes harder to maintain that. I've got power to drag through some of these shorter climbs, but holding mid 200s or holding mid 300s to 400 watts for a few minutes at a time is definitely not in my wheelhouse just yet. And so I'm doing my best to stay off the back, stay with this group, trying to not fall off the back too far, because I know not only is JD in this group, which I'm always looking to race with him, since he's such a great rider, great racer. I know he's got a good amount of power, and I know that he's kind of my benchmark. If I can stay with him, then that means I'm progressing, I'm doing better. And so doing my best to stay with this group. They're starting to pull away just a little bit, and as we get into this steeper incline coming off the back of this draggy kind of falls flat into this 4 or 5%, I'm starting to hurt. So I know that, you know, the group is slowly starting to creep away from me, and if I don't, you know, just if I don't stay solid on the pedals, then I'm gonna end up falling off the back of this group even further, and it becomes harder and harder. You know, as once you're by yourself, it becomes harder and harder to catch up to these groups, because they have the momentum, they've got the power of the entire group. So I do a little bit of a surge here, knowing that there's this false flat coming up into this blue section, and I can at least rest a little bit. But ultimately, they end up pulling away. And so I got this TFC rider that came up behind me, and I figured if I can just stay on his wheel for a little bit, then I can, you know, if we can keep not too far of a gap between us and the group in front of us, then I know I can catch back onto that group on the downhill on the backside of this climb. So again, just pushing a little bit hard here, so that way I can, you know, kind of stay focused on staying with this group. I see JD starting to slip back a little bit and end up, you know, catching up to him. And so when I started passing him, you know, I let off the pedals a little bit, because I was like, you know what, let me put him in my draft and just we'll both get to the top of the climb together. I know I can work with JD to, you know, to essentially make the catch with this group if we do end up catching them. But more importantly, we can work together to get to the end of this race, you know, and focus on getting to, you know, getting to the finish line strong. So again, as we're getting up to the top part of this bridge, at the end of the sprint here, you know, I'm essentially towing JD along, doing my best to hold him in my draft, and then, you know, end up easing off the pedals a little bit to kind of swing him forward. Kind of like, I looked at it so as I was doing it, I was looking at it from the mindset of like track cycling, where, you know, I'm building up my momentum for him, he's staying on my wheel. Then if I could back off, you know, if I back off, I let his momentum swing in front of me, and then I can catch back on, which is kind of what happened here. You know, so he shot forward. Obviously there were other people that were coming with him that we were towing at that moment. So they end up shooting forward ahead of me, which was fine because now I get to draft again. So going downhill, you know, we basically stayed pretty tight as a group. You know, we got the one guy that's kind of slipping off the front there. But again, you know, I wasn't worried about, you know, in terms of whether people were going off the front or not. My focus was, you know, if I can stay with JD, we can keep this group together. You know, I'll do what work I can for him, so that way, you know, we can get through some of these, you know, longer stretches of not too much going on, you know, downhill, uphill, you know, some S turns, but it's still, you know, this isn't where the action happens in terms of this stage. You know, everything is, you know, everybody's going to be holding what they can for the final climb on this stage. So that's kind of what's happening here. So as we get to the backside of this bridge, I've been off the front for a little bit, and I'm noticing that the guys behind me are just kind of coasting. They're, outside of JD, they're not doing, they're really not doing much. So I start upping my RPMs just a little bit, trying to get into the low to mid or so 90s, at that point, and, seeing whether or not they were gonna, put any more effort into keeping up. And sure enough, they did. And so as we hit the beach here, I started backing down the power a bit and letting them kind of come around. Because again, from here, it's just, now our focus is conserving what energy we have to get to this last climb. And so we did a good job of staying together, staying bunched together. JD ended up going off the front for a little bit and kind of towing us along, but we're still, I'm still holding mid 200s in terms of RPM, or not RPM, in terms of wattage. And so really just trying to focus on, getting to the front, or getting to the base of this climb as a group. And so here we go, entering the climb. So I end up, off the front again. No big deal. I figured, I'll tow us to the beginning of the climb, but I was not going to work hard. I was trying to stay in the 200s in terms of wattage, the low 200s, so that way, I can conserve some energy myself. And whoever wants to go off the front will go off the front. But obviously the group stayed together. These guys knew that with this climb coming up, we need to conserve what we can. And so as we get into this, first main part of the climb, I see the guys starting to shoot forward a little bit, which obviously prompts me to put out, some more power. I wanted to stay with this group. I knew that if I could stay with them, then I could finish strong, finish with them. These guys were definitely pushing a little bit harder than I was planning to. You can see right now I'm in the 5 watts per kilogram, 4.5, in that range. As we, every time we hit the orange parts of the climb, and these guys are doing about the same, but they're holding a little bit stronger in between. And that's, this is where they start kind of putting pressure on me, is they're able to hold a little bit higher wattage in between these bright orange sections. So in these yellow sections, they catch up a little bit, even though I'm off the front here. I'm trying to rest a little bit, since that's a little bit of a longer section, knowing that this blue section's coming up. And so we got this this rider Keys that ends up coming up and passing me, which I wasn't too worried about, because I knew that at the pace he was going, he wasn't trying to launch off the front or make a strong attack. It seemed like he was just kind of letting his momentum carry him forward. And so I knew as we get into this blue section, I could stay with him and draft a little bit, spend a little bit of time in recovery, even though this section goes up at about almost 1% or so. So you don't get too much rest here. Still end up sliding off the front. And now we got this other rider in the Kaboom Zwift shirt, just kind of flowing off, just coming up behind me. And you got JD coming up behind me, but I'm still, focused on staying in the 300 watt range, so that way I can, kind of guide this, this climb. And, really that's kind of the range when it comes to climbing. That's the range that, I'm trying to get better at, is stay in the stay in the low 300s, mid 300s. And, so as we hit this longer part of the climb, I know I've still got my feather there. I feel like this is probably the best spot on this. Excuse me. Like I'm gonna sneeze. I feel like this is the best spot on this climb to use that, because it's such a long drag, 4 or 5%. You're gonna get a little bit of draft bonus here. As you can see, my drafting is 26 or so watts saved. So you're not gonna get much, but the feather helps. Especially getting up, keeping your momentum through that section, the feather's gonna help. And so as you can see, others, their feathers are starting to run out. Mine is running out right now. And so we've got a couple of these more just kind of stair step sections to go. So just doing my best to stay off the back of this rider, this TFC rider. I end up passing him, and I keep the rider in front of me in my sights, because I know if I can focus on kind of staying at their pace, then we can make it to the top of the climb together. So end up passing this other rider, and as I was passing people, I felt that was giving me the energy I needed to kind of finish strong and stay focused on getting over to the top. Even though I know JD's a little bit behind me, but he's a great racer, great rider, so I know he's going to catch up and we'll finish strong. So we got this, the TFC rider's kind of holding on to my wheel here, and as we start getting to this flat section, I see JD come up behind me and pass me. So at the time I'm thinking like, oh, he's gonna surge, gonna put in a strong effort to finish strong. So I started thinking like, oh, I should message him in my in the companion app, let him know to just, I wasn't sure if he was looking to try and tow me along, but I was already, my heart rate's in the upper 170s, it was spiking into the 180s consistently, so I started messaging him in the companion app, like, just go ahead, go. But because there was sweat on my phone, I wasn't able to get the actual message out. And in that same time, I ended up falling off the back a little bit, which was fine. because we were coming up towards the end here. We got a kilometer left to go, and you know, as we're getting out of the cave, out of the climb, I hit the flat spot. I'm just looking at the guys in front of me and thinking, I gotta hold, you know, whatever effort I can. I'm, you know, my legs are hurting at this point. My lungs are hurting. I just gotta hold whatever I can to get to, you know, either catch up to this group or just finish strong. I see they're pulling away from me. And at that point, I just kind of sat up and thinking like, you know what, I'm gonna hold, you know, mid 200s for as long as I can. You know, I'm surging into the 300s just to kind of catch up a bit and hold, but it's really like at this point it's really hard for me to hold that. So I end up stopping for a little bit, coasting down this 1% if I can, knowing that I got this TFC, I think it's the TFC, no, keys, the rider keys in front of me. And when I at some point, for whatever reason, at some point I thought this was JD, I guess just because of the black jersey. And I was thinking, oh great, I'll finish strong, you know, with JD and, you know, catch up to him. But and then I realized it's not JD, it's Keys, because it's a Tron bike and JD wasn't on the Tron bike this time. And so when I realized it's Keys, I started thinking like, you know what, we got a couple 100 meters left. I am not going to let him finish ahead of me. I'm going to surge one last time, just spike up my power, and the, you know, doing a small burst up to 700, almost 800 watts, just to get in front of him and then coast to the finish line. And man, what a race this was. Again, I felt good. I felt strong. I felt like, for once, I felt like in this 350 to 520 category, like I was meant to be there. Like I was finishing with the group, like I was, like I meant to be. And again, I didn't realize Darren was in this race, because if you look at the scoreboard here, he came in 7th place, which is obviously dotted out with the ellipse. So I didn't realize he was in there, but in the chat, I see JD, you know, congratulating him, and hear him on the stream congratulating him. I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, you know, it was so cool to have Darren, you know, Darren part of the race. I wish I would have recognized that he was there, because he's such a great rider that I could have, you know, JD and I could have worked. And again, JD was also surprised because we could have worked to push up to his group with him when they started going off the front, and we could have, you know, likely finished in a better spot. And so hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully the audio came through this time. This is my 3rd time recording this, and every single time the audio has had an issue. But that's, you know, that's part of this whole process of growing and learning. Again, great race for those that were in, you know, in this time, the 6 p.m., 6-ish p.m., you know, East Coast, 350 to 520 group had a fantastic time. And again, hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next race.